welcome back everybody. It's the Michigan couple. I'm the Michigan wife.
And I'm the 8-5 Michigan husband.
And we're here to talk about the last game that Michigan Wolverine football team played in 2024. The ReliaQuest Bowl, used to be the Outback Bowl in Tampa, Florida. It was played on December 31st, 2024. And resulted in a victory for Michigan. Kind of an unexpected victory, I have to say.
Well, it ended, like you said, and like your slide says, it ended the year the same way the year started.
Well, that was pretty cool.
By beating Alabama. Yes, somewhat unexpected, this one. Last one to start the year was pretty close, but a little bit more expected. I don't know about expected, but...
No, that was an overtime game as well, wasn't it? I don't
Yeah.
have it here on the slide, but it was a win, but it was an overtime win. So I think it was probably two fairly evenly matched teams. This one was predicted to be, just as the Ohio State game was predicted to be,
A slaughter.
a slaughter of Michigan, and it wasn't.
And it not only it wasn't, but even maybe more impressive than Ohio State, Alabama didn't have anyone really opting out.
They sure did, but probably not the
Very
major.
few people opted out
Right.
that were contributors. All of their starters basically started, to include their quarterback, Jalen Milroe, who's now declared for the NFL draft. And Michigan had 10-plus starters that opted out, whether they were going to the NFL or a couple of transfer portals or injuries. So we had a lot of rotational players and a lot of young guys playing in this game, which makes it a little bit more surprising, if that's the word we want to use.
Yes, even more surprising than the fact that we beat Ohio State, which is a very surprising result, is exactly to your point. Over and over and over again in the post-game analysis, many people pointed to Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant as two big reasons that we were able to beat Ohio State, and neither of them played in this game. But I think it bodes well, and we'll talk about this more in the defense section. I think it bodes well, particularly for our defensive side of the ball, that we had the second and third quote-unquote stringers in, and they played exceptionally well. So,
and Josiah Stewart didn't play as well.
Right.
It was a key piece along with Graham.
Makari Page did not
Grant.
play.
Makari Page didn't play.
Right. So okay. Well, it is a strange thing that we beat Alabama on the first day of 2024, and we beat Alabama on the last day of 2024. Same quarterback, so we beat him in particular twice. And we ended up, even though Alabama had a change of coach, we ended up beating Alabama's coach twice in 2024, which I think is the first time in history that has ever happened, in the fact that Kalen DeBoer coached Washington in the national championship game last year, where, of course, Michigan defeated him, and then again defeated him just a few days ago on the last day of the year. So not great vibes for Alabama, I have to say, but great results for this Michigan team.
Yeah, it was great. I don't know if it still 8-5 season. Certainly a great way to end the season. Have to wonder what went on in the middle there, and we talked about it on other episodes where it was a turnover here, a turnover there, close but no cigar type thing. So,
and a lot of confusion in that quarterback room, and a lot of confusion on the coaching sidelines. Somewhere in the middle of the season, we kind of lost our way. But let's talk about the offense in this game. It, like the Ohio State game, I wouldn't call it exceptional, but when he needs to do it, as he did in the Ohio State game, Davis Warren got the job done. He had a very nice touchdown pass to Frederick Moore, who I think has really come on in the end of the season. And, he got hurt, so we had Alex Orji for the end of the game. But kudos to Davis Warren. He took a tough year where he actually lost his starting job for a little bit of the year, came back, and had the fortitude to finish with 3 impressive wins. Yeah, the statistics don't really say that he's the MVP or anything like that, and indeed he was not the MVP of the bowl game, but when we needed it, when we needed that third down conversion or et cetera, I think Davis Warren got the job done. And I'm not kudos to him for this season. I don't anticipate him to be the starter next year. I'm sure you don't either. But he had some nice throws in this game, and it resulted in a win.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He's done basically what he's done all year long, with the exception of the early season when he got sat down. He took care of the football. He made good throws. The few that he made decent decisions. But this game was won not by the offense. The offense didn't lose the game either. They did what we've come to expect recently. They chewed up the clock. They ran the ball even when everyone in the universe knew they were going to run the ball.
And still were quite successful at times.
Well, I don't know about quite successful.
Jordan Marshall.
They only had 190 total yards. Yes, Jordan Marshall played great, MVP of the game, like you mentioned. He had 100 yards rushing. But there again, once you look at the stats, and much like Ohio State, it wasn't a pretty offensive game really from either team. But 115 yards rushing to Alabama's 68. Normally, you win the rushing battle, you win the turnover battle, and you win the time of possession battle, and
you're gonna get
a W.
Yeah.
Your offense wears down their defense, and as the game goes on, the running game gets better and better and better. So, yeah, they did well. The offense did what they needed to do.
And to the point of, we were talking just earlier about people sitting out and this kind of thing. No Khalil Mullings, no Donovan Edwards. We had Jordan Marshall and we had Ben Hall, and they did well. Marshall a little bit better than Hall, Marshall being the MVP of the game, but you can see next year, especially with our new running back that is coming to Michigan, is his name Justice Haynes. And so you can see there's going to be a nice running back room, as is the tradition of Michigan offense next year, and that's something definitely to look forward to. Jordan Marshall certainly impressed, and he got the bulk of the carries, I would say, with the absence of Edwards and Mullings. The offense didn't have any particularly long drives that I remember because they kept getting the ball on a short field. I guess we'll talk about that in the defensive section, but this game began in the most bewildering way, certainly for Alabama, but I don't think any Michigan fan thought that they would turn on their television and by the end of the first quarter it'd be 16-0 Michigan. Everything that could go wrong for the Alabama offense did go wrong for the Alabama offense in that first quarter.
No, sure did. And, you mentioned the game was the ReliaQuest Bowl, which is a cybersecurity company. I didn't know that. Had to look that up. But it was down there at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa, the old Outback Bowl. So one of the factors to that 16-0 start was the crazy weather. Anybody who's ever lived in Florida can tell you the weather changes pretty quickly sometimes. And those pop-up intense thunderstorms are not uncommon. So to go from sunny and bright to a torrential rain downpour where the announcer says, I don't know if I've ever seen a football game with such heavy rain, didn't really surprise me, and apparently it didn't surprise Michigan coaching staff either, which we'll give them some kudos for, because they did wet ball drills all week, all bowl practice, leading up to the game, and clearly Alabama didn't, or they just didn't do them very well because we were able to hang on to the football and they thought it was a grease pig or something.
Well, and that's kind of surprising, I have to say. Kalen DeBoer spending some time at Washington. I don't know exactly how long he was there, but the Pacific Northwest is certainly known for the copious amount of rain that it gets. So you would think that, if anything, he would be the one that would be coaching his team and doing the wet ball drills or whatever, but it seems like they didn't have the right footwear. They were slipping quite a bit, and Michigan was not. So lots to look forward to. To round this out, I just want to say I think our offensive line did well. They're not going to win any awards this year, but the Northwestern game, the Ohio State game, and this game, the offensive line was giving Davis time to throw, opening up holes for Jordan Marshall. They did fine.
Yeah, at times they did, and at other times they got destroyed and obvious passing downs and things like that. They did a nice job with the run game blocking, I thought. Not so much with the passing, even though he did have some time. So I disagree with you slightly on that point.
Okay.
But there are a bunch of young guys in there as well. folks didn't play. I thought Evan Link did a nice job at left tackle. It looked like a road grader at points, and then at other points he completely whipped on blocks. So I think they were young. They're going to continue to grow. We have some transfers coming in, and have some highly regarded recruits from last year that redshirted. So the offensive line, I think, especially with Sharon Moore being an offensive line coach to begin with, will continue to be a strength for Michigan, and that bodes well for the future.
Great. And anyone noticing this photo actually is from 2015. Again, we say it every week, we use photos that are approved by the Creative Commons process, so I wasn't going to just snatch someone's ReliaQuest Bowl photos, and we did not go to the ReliaQuest Bowl, but I do like this photo, and this is actually the uniform that Michigan was wearing at the ReliaQuest Bowl, so it does make a little bit of sense to have this photo of the offense here. All right. Let's move on to the stars, definitely, of the last couple games that Michigan has had, the defense. The first drive for Alabama, they decide to go for it on 4th down, and Milroe gets sacked by Derek Moore, and that really set the tone for, I'd say, the entire game. I'm not sure how many sacks in total Michigan had. We're not a statistical podcast. We try to be as accurate as possible, but I know we had at least 4. I'm going to say maybe we finished with 5 sacks total, but Derek Moore and TJ Guy met at the quarterback more than once. They both played so well in this game. Wesley Walker had a moment in the first quarter where he tipped an interception to himself. That first quarter in particular, it seemed like Jalen Milroe and the Alabama offense could do almost nothing right. And it seemed like our defense was doing everything right. The downpour, the rain contributed to that, of course. But my goodness, what a performance by the Michigan defense.
100%. Hey, great sign down there in Ybor City. I've seen that myself live.
And the brick wall that our defense was.
Yes,
that's what I was trying to convey.
I get that.
Yeah.
But
it is a
like
great
brick
sign.
Wall.
It is a
but
great
no,
sign.
The defense did great, and I think that's I think it was the most surprising thing, because a lot of credit for the Ohio State game went to the stars that you mentioned. Makari Page, Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Josiah Stewart. And they were all out.
Yeah.
So you saw a lot of the rotational players, the Derek Moores, TJ Guys, Rashawn Benny, those folks get in and play well. I mean, Derek Moore had 2 sacks. You're right. We had 5 total. Derek Moore, everybody believes, is coming back for next year. He hasn't actually made a decision yet. I'm hope he played great.
I'm hoping he's a priority.
I hope he didn't play
too well
enough, so well that he decides to forego his next year. So hopefully we can pay that man, just like I'm sure we're paying Zavada, and we should probably pay a few other folks.
Yeah.
I don't think Barham played. Actually, he did play. I'm sorry. He played, but I know he's getting ready to move to defensive end next year. The edge rusher, defensive end, edge rusher next year. So that'll be good. And then talking about the defense, I don't know if you have a slide up here for transfers or things like that. Of course, Michigan already got the one defensive line transfer from Alabama, Bryant, who's from Michigan himself. I'm sorry, why did I say Bryant? Damon Payne. My apologies. I was thinking about Bryant, who got a tackle in this game. So Damon Payne from Belleville, Michigan, he's committed. And then just reported this morning.
Breaking news.
A massive, supposedly a massive transfer news. Trey Williams from Washington, D.C., from Clemson is transferring to Michigan. He had some problems staying healthy at Clemson, but when he was healthy, he was an absolute wrecking ball. So that bodes well for the future. You're not going to replace Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant easily, but that's a pretty good start, especially considering what we have staying home.
Yeah, my goodness. And once again, I know we talked about this at length during our Ohio State recap, but Wink Martindale, what a job that man has done. And there were many people that thought, give him a little bit of time. He's going to adjust from the NFL process to the college. And it seems like that adjustment has taken place, because our defense is totally on fire and playing unbelievably. The only really unfortunate part of how well the defense played, particularly in that first quarter, is we kept kicking field goals after the defense would get us the ball in the red zone practically, or very near the red zone. I think maybe the red zone every single time in that first quarter. We kept kicking field goals. That's not a bad thing, but if we had that really powerhouse offense to match what our defense was doing, perhaps we would have been up much more than 16-0 after the first quarter.
I think the future of the defense is pretty bright, and I think it's going to be the formula for Michigan's success going forward. Because when you have a defense like Michigan has had in 2023, 2024, and even before, where you control the lines of scrimmage and you can stop the run and force folks to be one-dimensional, you get off the field, your offense can be mediocre, as we've seen this year. And our offense is only going to get better. I dare say, I know we're talking about defense, I dare say that this offense is probably the worst we will see for a long time. So if our defense can maintain close to what it's doing now, the future, to me, is pretty bright.
Yes, and I think many photos were circulated of our new recruit in the quarterback area, Bryce Underwood, and he is a giant. He's much taller than a lot of people thought he would be, at least much taller than I thought he would be. And he apparently, from all accounts, he is doing extremely well in practice, and everybody is looking forward to having Bryce Underwood in the fold, along with Mikey Keene, who transferred to Michigan from Fresno State. We played him in the first game of the year, and he is also coming in. So new additions at quarterback, and we'll just see how that goes next year. I think we've wrapped up the defense. Amazing job, Wink. Let's hope Derek Moore comes back. And we're going to move on to special teams. What can we say about special teams? Now, do you know who this new punter was? We had a new punter, and who is this person?
Well, his name is Hudson Hollenbeck, and he actually punted very well. I've been pretty hard on Tommy Doman a few times this year for untimely shanks or poor punts. Hudson Hollenbeck has never kicked in a college game before.
No way.
That's what the announcer said.
Huh.
I believe that's true. And our backup punter, if he would have gotten hurt, was Klein, the tight end. So Hudson Hollenbeck kicked 6 times for an average of 46.2 yards and had some very timely ones that pinned him back fairly deep, which, of course, we know they ended up having turnover or whatever the case may be, which put us in good positions. So I was very happy with the punting. I was a little less happy with the punt return coverage, especially towards the end of the game. Maybe it was the end of the game, end of the half, where they had a very long return, got them back to about the 50, and really put them in good shape where you catch the ball on the 5 and you return to the 50. That's on your coverage team. Sorry, we've got to pin him back there.
Yeah, well, good for Hunter. Is that his name? Hunter?
Hudson. Like
Hudson,
the river.
Hudson Hollenbeck.
Yeah.
Very good job. I can't believe that's his first time kicking in college. Dominic Zavada, the exciting news that has happened since our last episode is that he is coming back to Michigan for another year. And I felt like he was going to go right to the NFL. He's not. He's coming back. We need him.
He's better than a lot of NFL kickers, it certainly seems. Now, granted, the goalposts, I believe, are a little bit more narrow in the NFL. At least they used to be. They may be the same now. But, once again, a stellar performance, 4 for 4, 45-yard longest. He had 13 points.
Extra point?
Michigan only had 19 points, and he had 13 of them.
He's so amazing.
So he actually had the same amount of points as Alabama did.
That is really funny. That's true. Yeah, well, we kicked, as I said, a lot of field goals, and at least one of those field goals he made in the driving rain. And that was during the rainstorm when we decided to kick one of those, and it was not that close that I remember. So shout out to him. every single week it seems like shout out to him. And what an exciting piece of news that we got that he's coming back to Michigan, because with an improved offense, a great defense, and Dominic Zavada, we really have a lot of exciting things to look forward to, I think, in 2025. All right. The coaching staff. Well, we've talked about Wink Martindale, just an exceptional job. Sharon was all right. He did some really weird thing at the end of the second quarter. Alabama had the ball and they didn't have any timeouts and they were trying to move it down the field, and it was third down and Sharon called a timeout. With 32 seconds left in the first half, Sharon calls a timeout, which is a gift to Alabama because they didn't have any. And the next play, Jalen Milroe, I think it was Jalen Milroe, took it all the way down, and Alabama ended up in the red zone. They ended up kicking a field goal. They did not get a touchdown. But what was the thinking behind that? Do you have any idea why Sharon Moore would call a timeout there? Was he kind of assuming that our defense would hold Alabama and then maybe we could get the ball?
I think it's just a factor of, that's a first-year head coach. I think it was a tactical mistake. I don't think he'll do it again. I'm not sure. I believe in his press conference after the fact, he kind of mentioned it and said, yeah, oops. It was just a bad decision. You're up already. Your offense isn't really going anywhere. The chances of stopping really any team on 3rd and 1, much less Alabama, when there's only 30 some odd seconds left to go in a half and they're deep in their own territory, and they seemed content to let the clock run out because it's one of those plays. Hey, they get a big play, maybe they try to go for it. I think if we call a timeout there, the half expires and they don't get those 3 points. So I just think it was a tactical error.
You think if we don't call the timeout?
I think if we don't call the timeout.
Right. Okay. But you said if you think we call the timeout.
If they don't call the time, we don't call the timeout.
Right.
They do not get 3 points because I think they run a play, they run a running play on 3rd down, and maybe the result would have been the same. I don't know. Hindsight's 2020, I guess. But I think the most likely scenario is that they get a couple yards, they get a first down, and the clock continues to tick, and they run out of time. But at the end of the day, it worked out. We won. Hopefully he'll learn from it. I just think that's one of those head coaching experience type things,
right,
where he is going to continue to learn and grow into it. I heard somebody say he's trying to become more of a CEO type head coach. Let Wink take care of the defense. Obviously, he has override ability.
And we got a new offensive coordinator since our last episode.
Chip Lindsey from North Carolina, who Drake May endorsed. And, of course, Drake May is a Patriots quarterback and was a very good college quarterback when he was there at North Carolina. And his development was one of the reasons why he's coming in now. And he's always produced good offenses. So I think that's going to be a good addition to the coaching staff. But I just think that timeout was one of the things that Sharon Moore's learning on the job, kind of like the challenges he had earlier in the year, some of the other suspect timeouts. I think he's a student of the game. I think he's shown that he will make changes, such as Kirk Campbell, and he's willing to learn from things that happen and make adjustments. I don't think we'll see that again.
Let's hope not. And I will give him. I've been a very critical commentator about Sharon Moore. Certainly, I have not, as I said last episode, turned in my I'm upset with Sharon Moore and not sure he's the best choice card. I haven't turned in that yet. But I will say this. I did see something, certainly over the last 3 games that Michigan played, that made me believe a little bit more in Sharon Moore, and that's the fact that he definitely seems to know how to build a culture or maintain a culture at the University of Michigan. The student athletes seem to really enjoy playing for him. Everybody, even going on to the Ohio State field, he said something like, let's go out and have fun today. They are easy breezy. They are, despite all the challenges that they have faced this year, everyone really seems to be enjoying the culture at Michigan. And the fact that we've been able to land some pretty significant transfers in the transfer portal
And they continue to land.
And continue to land also speaks to the fact that Michigan has a great culture. And that's something that I said all year, not on this podcast, but to other people about Ryan Day and Ohio State. Now, Ohio State is doing very well in the college football playoffs, but when it came to the Michigan game and when it came to the year that Ohio State had, people were saying, oh, what do you think at the beginning of the year? What do you think about Ohio State? They went out, they got all this talent, they're bringing back all these people. And I've always been suspect, can Ryan Day create a culture at Ohio State? He has tried a number of things, including running around and doing almost like a mosh pit before one of the Michigan games in previous years, trying to really pump his team up, but it never seemed authentic. And I think Ryan Day has always had trouble creating a reason that people should believe in that team and go to Columbus. That's just from an outside observer. Sharon Moore, on the contrary, seems to be doing a good job at explaining and at selling, so to speak, to recruits and to transfers the Michigan culture and what Michigan is all about.
Well, I think we talked about it some during the Ohio State podcast as well. There's real and there's fake. And everybody's heard the whole term real, recognize real. If you're being legitimate and your message to the kids, per se, is authentic, that resonates. If you're not, you're not. To your point with Ryan Day, yeah, the culture of Michigan's heads and shoulders above what it is at Ohio State. And this is going to sound stupid, but I think it has some element of truth to it. People on Twitter clown Ryan Day for dyeing his beard super dark black. Everybody in the country knows it's not natural. It's vain. It's
inauthentic.
It's inauthentic.
Yeah.
And if that's how you're going to be, and believe me, I don't give two craps about his beard. But if you're more worried about image, instead of process and results, then you're faking the funk. And you can't fake it till you make it in this business. Just take a look at how Ohio State, the players, act. Michigan runs out on the field. Ohio State's lined up along the sidelines trying to intimidate them. They get their butts kicked on the field. Michigan plants a flag. Ohio State comes over, tries to have fake fights. They did the same thing to Tennessee. They lined up. They're trying to start. They're hard with their words and they're soft with their actions.
Except the last two games.
Well, granted, they played great the last two games. I think Michigan lit a fire under some of the players.
That's it.
And the coaches realized, hey, we're stupid because we have Jeremiah Smith, who's probably the best receiver in the country, and
Emeka Buka,
and they have good players, but because it goes back to that, because it goes back to the vanity of the argument with Lou Holtz, and we're a tough team. And if you have to tell somebody you're a tough team,
you're probably not.
Clue, you're not a tough team.
Probably not a tough team. And I was thinking about this. You led me right into what I wanted to say about this. I honestly think that the loss to Michigan and all of the national media commenting on what a bad job Ryan Day has done, what a weak team Ohio State is, what a disgrace the whole thing was, and what a disappointing season, even though they've only lost 2 games, which for most teams would not be a disappointing season. But all of that noise actually created a culture for Ohio State to band together and say, well, it's us against everyone else. Because it was hard for them this year to have this whole Ohio versus everyone when they're beating everyone except Oregon, who they lost to by 1 point. And it was hard for them to be like, oh, poor us, poor us, poor us. It was hard for Ryan Day probably to find something to band them together. And that Michigan loss, as ironic as it is, I think, banded them together because really the whole country was sort of clowning them, and now they're on fire. They look like they might actually win it all.
Yeah, that and they've changed their style of play. I want to say that they weren't trying to get the ball to their playmakers. But most teams don't have a Mason Graham, a Kenneth Grant, a Josiah Stewart, Barham. And if you can pressure any team with a 3 or 4 person or 3 or 4 man rush,
Derek Moore,
you can then have extra coverage in the back end. And you can bracket receivers and you can do other things. When you have to rush 5 or 6 to get pressure to the quarterback, they're going to eat you up because you cannot cover their receivers. That's the biggest difference in how Michigan defended. And Oregon, I mean, come on. We gave Tennessee and Oregon the game plan, and they couldn't do it. Maybe Texas can because they have a pretty good defensive line. We'll see.
We'll see.
But if you can get pressure on any team with a 4-man rush, it gives you extra folks to cover on the back end, which makes it very difficult to defend. So, yeah, they're soft, but
I think Michigan galvanized.
Michigan also played very, very well. And you're probably right. Michigan probably galvanized them a little bit, and
now they're on a mission.
And I hope they lose. But you know what? If they don't, if they win the whole national championship, great. I may even buy a mug just so I can see the Michigan loss on it.
One funny thing that happened over the holidays is people were receiving patches of Ohio State turf from the stadium that had been pulled up apparently in 2021 that sites were selling to presumably Ohio State fans. Oh, don't you want a piece of the turf? But Michigan fans were buying them as gifts for other Michigan fans and then planting little mini Michigan flags in the turf that came from Ohio State Stadium. And that is pretty funny. That's a pretty funny holiday gift. So we're going to move on now and talk about our final thoughts on the season. We've been talking about specific players, and the name Moore has come up a lot. I wanted to mention something funny on the MGO blog podcast that came out after the Ohio State win. They always have the Sklar brothers on, and one of the Sklar brothers jokingly said, we should have a 1 more year fund and pay Rod Moore, Derek Moore, and Frederick Moore to come back. And I thought that was pretty funny because all 3 of them would be amazing to have on next year's team. And I do sincerely believe that Michigan will make an effort to pay all of them to come back. We were a team this year that showed growth. We got it together in the end. For sure, our last 3 games were a delight, even though they were scarily, the 2 latter ones were scarily close at times. But all in all, I leave this season feeling much, much better about Michigan football and this team and the future, the 2025 team, than I did in, say, early October. Or mid-October? What are your thoughts about the season as a whole?
Yeah, I don't think anybody's satisfied with 8-5. I don't think it's where Michigan wants to be. However, the way the 8-5 came about has to give you some hope, some optimism, and some satisfaction. Every trophy game, Michigan won.
Every rival game.
Michigan State, Ohio State. They beat USC. They beat Alabama. So it's never a bad season when you beat Ohio State and Michigan State. And then you throw in the cherries on top with USC and the rest of the trophy games.
And the trophy
Minnesota,
games. Right.
Northwestern, like I said. It's a successful season. Do we want to lose to Illinois and Washington?
And Indiana?
No. And will we in the future? Maybe sometime, but certainly not regularly.
And, maybe this season had to happen this way to get the donors on board, to get the people that really might have been dragging their feet to give to the NIL fund or whatever to, say, hey, we need to go out and get some talent. We need to be able to pay. That's the nature of college football. Love it or hate it. That's the way it's going. So maybe it galvanized some people. Maybe if we'd kind of eked out victories against Illinois, Indiana, Washington, we wouldn't have as many motivated fans that had some means to join the collective and say, okay, we're all in now, because there has been a dramatic change as far as my understanding of how aggressively we are now involved in NIL. And we also seem to be doing it very carefully. I think, is his name Sean McGee, who is a person who is sort of treating this like an NFL operation?
Yeah, he's a general manager, and we're doing it right, I think. We're doing it without crazy, bold promises. I think they're making legitimate offers, and they're going to follow through with them. You read a lot of other places where, I was offered this, I didn't get this, and they transfer right away, whatever the case may be. I think we're doing it the right way. We're being cautious but proper, and we're clearly in the market. I mean, you don't get Bryce Underwood without being in the market. You're not a competitor for the offensive tackle Haywood from Alabama without being competitive in the market.
Right.
There again, we already got 2 defensive tackles now. Got Andrew Marsh, the wide receiver. Yeah, we're being competitive in the portal, which is encouraging, and our high school recruiting remains very solid.
But it doesn't sound like we're being ridiculous either. Like,
no, we didn't spend
heard,
$20 million on
Right.
the team in 1 year.
Well, and also you've heard some things of, oh, this person's really interested in Michigan, and then you see them go somewhere else, and then the news comes out, well, it was one wide receiver and he wanted $4 million or something, and this was someone who didn't have like that much of a proven track record or whatever. We're not doing those deals.
No.
Some other teams seem to be doing some of that because they seem a little bit desperate.
Yeah, we're not going to be the highest bidder for every single player just because
Right.
we want to get the highest player everywhere. You
Right.
have to fit the culture.
Yep.
You have to fit what it means to be a Michigan man.
Yep.
And yeah, the dollars are going to be there, but the dollars also have to be right. You're going to overvalue yourself. You're going to go do that somewhere else.
Yep. So I'm glad that we ended the way that we did. It certainly was a little bit dark there in the middle of the season, but all in all, for all the reasons that you've mentioned, fairly good season. You know, I may not have said that a couple months ago, but I could say it now. Next up, we've got the spring game. There's no announced date for the spring game. This
Sometime
is
in
a
April.
cartoon of a Michigan Wolverine who is getting ready to throw the ball and just so happens to be wearing 19, the probable number that Bryce Underwood's going to be wearing. This is not a caricature of Bryce Underwood. I want to make that clear. It is a Wolverine throwing a ball, but happens to be wearing number 19 amongst the spring flowers there at the spring game. Have you attended a Michigan spring game before?
I believe we have once, but it was a long time ago.
Okay, I've attended quite a few, of course, in my days at Michigan. It is usually cold at the spring game, but I think this year in particular, it is going to be very well attended because people are excited to see some of the people transferring in, the new recruiting class. Bryce Underwood is going to be a big draw, so are you tempted to travel to Ann Arbor possibly for the spring game?
I'm tempted to travel to Ann Arbor any day of the week. So, yes.
All right. Finally, 8-5, as we mentioned, looking towards the future. Anything else you want to say on this season of podcasting, our very first season of ever doing anything like this? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Tell us your overall thoughts of being a first-time podcaster covering Michigan football.
Oh, I think it was great. It was fun.
It was fun, wasn't it?
You're happy. You've certainly enjoyed it, so that's
Yeah.
what counts to me.
That's right.
And,
Happy wife, happy life.
That's right.
All right.
And but I do have one complaint.
Yes.
We didn't get very many comments, so leave a
No,
comment.
Yeah, we don't get very many comments. We would love a comment. So give us a comment if you're listening to this. Thank you to anyone that has listened to this episode or any of our other episodes. We did have a really good time. And until our next episode, which will probably be after the spring game, keep calm and
Go Blue!
Blue.
Leads the team so grand. Woodson's magic in the stands. Robinson running free so bold. Michigan blue and Maize untold. Brady's passes tearing through. Wheatley's stride so fast and true. Sanger still catching every flight. Michigan fights with all its might. We are victors of Michigan. Raise the banner high again. For us all, the Akabutuka never falls. Dear strength on battle's field, Ford's legacy forever sealed. We stand tall and proud and cheer for the Wolverines we hold dear. Oh, Michigan, where heroes rise beneath the blue victorious skies. Every game they fight so true. Legends born of Maize and blue. Marching forward, never yield. In the big house we reveal. Spirit fierce and heart so strong. In this anthem we belong. Brave classes tearing through. Wheatley stripes so fast and true. Saying we're still catching every flight. Michigan fights with all its might.